Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. Hey, flying solo for this episode. Cousin Shane stuck at work here, but man, I am sitting on a mountain of coaches' comments from spring football all across the SEC. So we're going to be able to hit on a ton of SEC teams. Wanted to make sure that we left you guys at least one more show before the week's done to get you into that weekend strong. So let's get right into the action. And first comments that we got to play here, not even related to fall camp necessarily, but Nick Saban, love him or hate him, you know, he is the authority on college football, SEC football, going into his 17th season there in Tuscaloosa. Remember, we all thought, and this guy ain't going to coach 2-3 seasons down there. He's going to be jumping back to the NFL. Now he's the dean of SEC coaches, and he gave a special shout out here on Thursday to Mal Moore, the former AD, former coach down there at Alabama, that he credits Mal Moore for being the main reason that he and Miss Terry decided to leave the Miami Dolphins and come back to college football. It's the anniversary, unfortunately, 10 years since the passing of Mal Moore. So Nick Saban gave him a shout out and shared a special story that he had here that I thought, of course, Alabama fans will love this, but I think just any SEC football fan can appreciate these.
You know, I wanted to mention something that probably doesn't mean a lot to people, but it means a lot to me, that you know, Mal Moore was really close, good friend, great supporter, really loved the University of Alabama, was here for a long, long time as a coach, as administrator, athletic director. Probably he was the biggest reason that, you know, we came here because of the relationship he developed with Miss Terry and us. And, you know, I think it's been 10 years since he's been gone, and we certainly miss him. Can't tell you how many things that are great sort of lessons and how much gratitude we have for the lessons that I learned from him and the things he did to support to help the program and help us get it turned around. So just a thought that everybody might say a prayer for Mal.
Coach, have you got a favorite story about Coach Moore that you could share with us?
Yeah, I do. You know, Mal used to always come in on Sunday when I'd be in the back room by myself watching film. And I usually go through the previous game with the coaches, which I watch it early in the morning. I go to church, I come in, watch it with the coaches, and I start on the other team. And at like every Sunday about 3 in the afternoon, he'd come in and, you know, just sit down. And I was complaining to him about when Mark Ingram was here, you know, his sophomore year. He carried the ball in the wrong arm a lot, but he was having a really, really good year, and we were having a good year. And I said something to Mal. I said, I don't know how we're going to get this guy to carry the ball in the right hand. And he said, you know, when I was coaching the quarterbacks here, I forget the quarterback's name, he said, I told Coach Bryant, and it was a starting quarterback, and he was a good player, that if he did something different in his throwing motion, that it would really make him a better passer. And Coach Bryant looked at him and said, don't mess with the guy. So what Coach Moore was telling me is, don't mess with Mark Ingram. But he used to tell me stories like that about players all the time, you know, from the past. So I enjoyed it so much, but I probably didn't tell the story very well, but it was a lesson learned that sometimes, you know, really good players, they might not do things exactly like you want them to, but if they're productive, you know, it's not worth changing them.
All right, Coach, thank you.
All right.
So going from one coach that is appreciative to another coach that was mad as hell recently, let's kick it off down to Lexington, where I love this. We've not had an update on Kentucky for here in a little while, and Mark Stoops and company, usually what they do, you know, they're just toiling away in the darkness there, getting stronger, tougher. being a program built on physicality and toughness on the offensive and defensive line. Of course, last year you couldn't say that about the offensive line. They're trying to change that. How far that offensive line progresses is going to be basically how far this team can go, because they have all the other pieces to have a huge bounce-back season in Lexington. But the way Mark Stoops tells it, this is probably the longest clip we've ever played of Mark Stoops, because a lot of times he's short. He's been known to joke around, but he was not joking around here. He was pissed off. We even got some profanities from old Mark Stoops. Pissed off, lackluster, no leadership on this team. Let's kick it over to Mark Stoops, who I've not seen him this heated during a preseason. But I got to be honest, I absolutely love it, because that means he's putting them to work the rest of camp, so that we don't have another lackluster performance, as he calls it, the rest of spring.
All right, guys, I don't have a lot to say today. I mean, just I'm a little frustrated, a little disappointed, a little pissed, to be totally honest with you. Just been lackluster the past couple days. I visited with you yesterday. Yes, it was a great day for Kentucky football. I love the pro day. Proud of those guys and love each and every one of them that trained yesterday and given a shot in the NFL, and that was fantastic. And guys we got right now, I don't know if they just think they're going to roll out of bed and be good or whatever, but it's not the same. We need to get back and play the way our brand was made, and that was by being tough and being physical and playing physical on both sides of the line of scrimmage, being able to run the ball. Just grateful for what we have. I just feel like we've got a bunch of guys that are entitled and don't work extremely hard and think it's going to happen and are waiting for the next guy to make it happen. And I'm not real pleased. So,
what do you look to in moments like this?
I don't know. We got no leaders right now.
Mark, were you seeing this before the spring break, or did this kind of start coming back after?
I don't know.
Okay.
No excuse. Bullshit. Yeah. Whatever it is.
Did you all actually scrimmage today, or was it just a normal?
No, it was a normal practice. We just moved the ball at the end, but not to the ground. Just done it and moved it.
Offense, I guess you want to see a leader. Who are the guys that you're expecting to be?
I don't see it right now.
Was this something that you'd all maybe anticipated would be a problem, or just shocking?
No, I don't. It's day by day, man. We're right in it. We're in the thick of it. It's a new team. We're cultivating our team right now and learning. And spring ball is about fundamentals and discipline and toughness and the basics. And we can't do that.
Is there an urgency with the spring schedule not being super long? You don't have a ton left, so what's that urgency of getting that figured out?
Well, it's long for us. We're here pretty long days every day. You know what I mean? These guys are here. You know what I mean? And I understand the monotony of it. They're here. At 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, and we have meetings and walkthrough and the off days and practice. So it's long for them. 5 weeks of the grind isn't exactly easy.
You mentioned that
but
yesterday.
It's still no damn excuse. That's where we got to get better, and they got to enjoy that part of it.
You mentioned it yesterday, the chip on your shoulder, getting back to that. What does that look like from the guys getting back to that chip on your shoulder?
Whatever. Whatever. We're made to be short today, but I'm not going to elaborate. You know what it is. I don't know, just a toughness and an attitude.
How could you not love that, especially if you're a Kentucky fan, fired up Mark Stoops, and they should be pissed. Hell, they let the fan base down and so much expectations. I was one of the few people that was not high on Kentucky last season. Of course, I was vindicated a little bit there. Major disappointment. Now there's some key pieces moving on to the NFL, but they've added via the transfer portal. That should shore up a lot of those deficiencies. So I think with this type of attitude, with this type of course, maybe Mark Stoops is saying it because his team's going to disappoint again. I ain't buying that, but I think he's trying to light a fire under their ass. And if nothing else, if I'm a Kentucky fan, that's exactly what I want to be hearing from my head coach after last season's disappointment. 7 wins, not good enough on the bluegrass anymore. We're trying to challenge Georgia for being the top dog in the SEC East. Kentucky could be that wild card team to get that done, but I had to lead off with that. Those comments were so good. Now, another team we've not been able to hit on much, just not been finding much nuggets or anything on them, but that's Mississippi State, with their currently in week 2 of spring camp, and the new coach Zach Arnett, his first spring leading the program. Of course, this will be his 4th year in Starkville, but I love this comment. Asked, with this reworked coaching staff, several new coaches, completely retooled the offensive coaching staff. How is that coming along? Well, the coaches, are they themselves? Usually you're worried about the players. How about the chemistry with the staff, how that's going in spring football? And I think this is an indication of the identity of the Mississippi State Bulldogs under Zach Arnett.
They say spring is a time for building chemistry within the team, but you got so many new faces on the coaching staff. Do you feel like the coaching staff is using the spring to sort of come together and form their own chemistry?
No, I think we're using it for the same reason the players compete, right? And then in turn that kind of creates some chemistry, in my opinion. So it's all about offense, defense getting after each other, trying to win the day. And so usually if you're a competitor, you like that, and you respect a fellow competitor. So it's been good.
How have you seen?
All right, I love it. And I feel like he picked this up from Coach Leach, because one thing that Mike Leach never got credit for, before he was the father of the air raid and all the funny and wacky things he would say, he was an offensive line coach. And his teams went as far as the offensive line performed. When his best teams across his coaching career were led not by the quarterback and receivers that put up all these prolific stats, but the offensive line. So I love these comments from Zach Arnett. Clearly, in my mind, Mike Leach rubbed off on the Mississippi State head coach. Now, big question mark for Mississippi State heading into the new season. How will Will Rogers perform in this Kevin Barbay system? If you're unaware, Will Rogers has been playing in the same offensive system since high school. His dad was an offensive coordinator at Brandon High School where he came up. They were inspired by Mike Leach and what he did at Texas Tech. So, I mean, he's been playing in the same system virtually his entire football career. Now it's a completely different animal. How's he taken to it? According to Zach Arnett, my man's already making checks at the line of scrimmage. It sounds like it's been a seamless transition. Let's kick it over to Zach Arnett one more time.
You've seen, I know it's a long way to go with Coach Barbay and the players getting used to this offense, but how have you seen Will grasp it so far?
Well, Will's such a professional in his approach. I mean, I bet you he probably goes through the install 3 or 4 times before he ever steps out on the field and does it. So he's having absolutely no problems. When you saw today, he's already checking plays at the line of scrimmage and seeing how the defense is aligned and getting from, might be changing run schemes, might be changing to a play action pass or a drop back game. So he's done a great job of approaching the installation and learning it, and I really like where he's at.
All right, next let's kick it on down to Arkansas. We're wrapping up about midway point here in spring for Arkansas as well. Just got back from spring break, I believe, and one thing that Arkansas has relied on seemingly every year is defensive line transfers to come in, play, and then these guys have been jumping off to the NFL. And sounds like they got 2 more hits here, according to Sam Pittman. Trajan Jeffcoat from Mizzou, John Morgan from Pitt. They made waves when they landed these 2 guys. They, according to Sam Pittman, have been the 2 of the biggest additions to the roster, at least via the transfer portal. Also hearing a lot of buzz about the tight end, Luke Haas. We're going to need some tight ends to step up in Arkansas' scheme here after Kendall Browse never really utilized the tight end. We're going to utilize it a lot more under Dan Enos. So it's interesting to hear the true freshman Luke Haas, who's more of a receiving, I don't want to call him Trey Knox, but he's more in that mold at this point in time, not an end-of-the-line blocker here. So we need pass catchers to step up. Look for Luke Haas if he continues to progress to be one of those guys that'll help KJ Jefferson on the field. But I really thought this was interesting. Sam Pittman asked about the offensive line. That's in flux right now. Always got to have confidence in the head hog to get that group whipped into shape, considering his long track record as arguably the best offensive line coach in the country. But at this point in time, with that portal window looming after spring, not just the offensive line, but all across the roster, you don't want to name starters or clue everyone into who is going to start and who's got no shot at starting for fear of everybody jumping into the portal. So I had never heard of anything like this, but Sam Pittman's essentially switching out the starters in every practice. This is pretty smart. And of course, he got this idea last season. He said when depth was an issue, and I'm sure he was sitting back saying, God, it would be nice to have so-and-so step in here once injuries occurred. So let's kick it over to Sam Pittman. I just thought this was some pretty interesting comments here.
Coach, going back to your offensive line, I'm curious, you're moving guys around right now. Do you have a deadline that you'd like to say, hey, here's the 5 we're going with? Is that something you've got set in stone yet?
No. And there's several reasons behind that. I mean, part of it is the damn portal opens up April 15th too. And you start setting deadlines on who's won and all that stuff in spring ball, and you start getting guys going in the portal. And they don't feel like they have a chance to win that position. So we don't really need to know who that is. We do need to find out. You know, we practiced all the time, Hutch. We'd practice ones, twos, and then combos where it would be maybe your quarterback's out or your left tackle's out or your center's out, and then you play with those guys to build confidence around their teammates around them. But we've kind of doing that every day. And basically, so you'll know, I've told our coaches to have somebody new in the starting lineup every single day at their position, except for KJ Jefferson.
And one other note here from Sam Pittman that I thought was pretty interesting. They're going to be running plays more on 3rd down to set them up to go for it on 4th down. I thought that was pretty interesting because of the team, failing to really struggling in short yardage and goal line last season. So it's interesting comments, no doubt, from Sam Pittman. And I looked up the numbers. Arkansas went for it 20 times last season. That was the 10th fewest in the SEC. Just for comparison's sake, Ole Miss went for it on 4th down 35 times, which led the SEC, so nearly double of Arkansas. And a lot of their losses, they did not go for it on 4th down. So I don't know if that factored into Sam Pittman's decision or not, but I think only 6 times they went for it on 4th down in the games they lost. So maybe needing to be a little bit more aggressive this fall in Fayetteville. Let's kick it over to Sam Pittman one more time.
When we get done with that, we'll go into situations, which would be 3rd down. Well, there'll be a situation of 3rd down. There'll be a situation of red area. I'm going to practice this year, Trey, for the first time. I'm going to practice 3rd down, play 4th. I think I've become a guy that's afraid or not afraid or concerned about going for it on 4th down. And the only way I'm going to find out whether I'm willing to do that is play 3rd down and go for it on 4th. Never have done that before, but I am going to do that. And there'll be all kinds of kicking. But it'll be a live scrimmage and with those situations thrown in.
Yeah. Hey, Sam, following up on what you were just saying about the 4th down, I thought that was interesting. How does that kind of mesh with Dan Enos's thoughts? Has he been more aggressive in the recent years on that?
Well, we've talked about it. Obviously, I haven't ever met an offensive coordinator that doesn't want to go for it on 4th down. And, there's no doubt that I'm very conservative on that, and I have been. The only way I can loosen that up, and obviously we have analytics, and we've paid a lot of money to have a guy stand on the sideline and tell me it says to go for it and all this kind of stuff. But I just feel like it's just like 2 minutes. You can't really get confident in how you handle your 2 minutes. Timeouts and things unless you practice it. Well, we practice it all the time. I'm looking to see I'm really looking to see if the offense will give me enough confidence to I'm not going to be Lane ever, at Ole Miss, and it's worked out well for him. Or the late Mike Leach, which, obviously he was willing to do that. I don't think I'll ever get to that point. But I want to get to a point to where if I feel like it's the right time and things of that nature, and I'm very confident in what we're running, I want to get to the point where I can go for it on 4th down more And the only way I know how to do it is have that type of situation.
All right, jumping down to College Station next, where Jimbo Fisher, one reason we're starting to get excited about the Aggies, which seemingly we do every offseason, only to have egg on our face by the end of the season, is that experience factor. Returning more production than anybody in the SEC. Listeners of this show probably already tired of hearing that stat. Returning, I believe, 19 of the 22 starters in the last game they played, which was a huge upset win over LSU. According to Jimbo Fisher, that experience is showing itself on the practice field early in College Station. So I just thought this was pretty interesting comments from old Jimbo.
Jimbo, I know you're only halfway through, but how much progress are you seeing, or what kind of progress are you seeing from some of those guys who were freshmen last year that played?
A lot, and just from the standpoint of what to expect, more detail in their position work, teamwork, just understanding a grasp of the concepts in much greater detail, and understanding not just when you're young, a lot of times you understand what you do. Now you're understanding what the guys around you do, which in turn, the more experience you get in something, allows you to trigger keys to how your job is done, or about what's to happen, or adjustments you have to make, and things like that. So, I mean, from that standpoint, from a mental standpoint, there's nothing that can replace experience. Talent is wonderful, and you're very talented guys, but you have to have experience, and I think that's what you're starting to see from those guys in the second year or third year, from what you're doing and your schemes, and just awareness of the big picture more so than, as I say, you see things through a straw, or you can see things, everywhere, down and, drive with two eyes instead of one. And, without doubt, strength, size, speed, and also the knowledge. But you see, well, they're stronger, which is true, but when you know what to do better and you know what's coming, it allows you to play faster and allows you to play more physical. It's a mental and physical difference, which translates to the physical difference that you see as far as how they perform on the field.
Front right. Cole.
And one other item that I thought was pretty interesting, because, again, Jimbo is very experienced. He's been a head coach for decades here, seemingly, and an assistant coach at a high level prior to that. But, with the recruiting rules changing seemingly every year in the last couple, they're allowing juniors to take official visits during spring. And not only officials, but, unofficial recruiting just continues to get sped up more and more and more. We're seeing tons of junior players and sophomore players committing. Many seniors that have not even started their senior year have already made up their mind. And it's a big reason why when the signing period rolls around, I mean, most of the classes are already put together, because the recruiting calendar just continues to speed up annually. And that is something that Jimbo Fisher, now that he's not the offensive coordinator, play caller, quarterback coach, and all that, he's having more time to deal with these recruits at practice. I just thought this was pretty interesting, noting that and it's not just A&M, it's everywhere across the SEC, but every practice now in spring features a handful of recruits. And then during the weekend, I mean, it's official visit weekend all across the SEC. So let's get over to Jimbo, just discussing this new era of recruiting and how his new responsibilities is kind of freeing him up to handle some of these duties while he was maybe not as open or able to do those in years past.
Kind of piggybacking on that, Jimbo, how different has this spring been for you with Bobby basically handling, the minute operations of the offense?
Not a lot different, but really in the last couple of years, because what's changed everything right now, and you don't realize this, but I talk about NIL, it's recruiting rules. I mean, for instance, we have, whether it's 5 to 15 guys at every practice, recruits. And on the weekends, you're talking about 20, 40, 50 guys sometimes coming in. So the amount of time you're having to spend in recruiting in the last 2 years for head coaches is drastically changed everything. Because basically you understand something, from April 1st till June 24th or 5th, that's an official visit weekend every weekend. And the kids that are constantly coming through now, and the transition of players coming to your campus, it used to be a lot. It's more now than it's ever been at any time in college football, in my opinion. So, I mean, from those time constraints as a head coach, it's been that. Now, Bobby's done a great job what we're doing, which he's done a tremendous job, and also knowing you got an experienced guy in the room when you're in there recruiting and doing things and decisions, and he can run. I mean, that's a big deal. You know what I mean? But I'm not he's doing a great job. But for head coaches in general right now, the time constraints in the last 2 to 3 years when all those official visits came available for juniors, and that's changed football as much as anything for your time constraints. I mean, you understand, there's no weekends, both weekends, almost both days of every weekend, you're working year-round now, except for if it's a dead period. They're here.
All right, next let's get on down to Ole Miss, where, of course, we got arguably the most intriguing quarterback competition all across the SEC with Jaxson Dart, Spencer Sanders, Walker Howard, trio of quarterbacks competing for that role. But are they really what we got comments from Jaxson Dart here in just a second. But Lane Kiffin, I thought, is pretty interesting. He seems pleasantly surprised by how Jaxson Dart has responded to this challenge. And that's even coming with all this buzz. Keep hearing Walker Howard, Walker Howard, Walker Howard. He's apparently the real deal down there in Oxford. But his first year in the system, his first camp in the system, whereas Jaxson Dart started all last season. And now it's his belief that, hey, I am the starter here. Interesting comments. Let's kick it over to Lane Kiffin and Jaxson Dart on his quarterback competition.
Lane, how have you seen Jaxson handle bringing in a couple new quarterbacks?
I think it's been great for him. I think that it's natural for us not to, want competition around, and certainly understand that. But I think it's been really good for him. He's looked great, which is strange to say for a returning starter. He's probably one of our most improved players out there, and he looks better physically, mentally, everything. So we've been very excited about him so far.
You've improved a lot. Where do you think you have improved the most?
I just think my confidence in the system. I've talked to Coach Kiffin about this a lot, as well as Coach Weiss, and you kind of look at how Matt was from year 1 to year 2, and just his comfortability in the system and how he was able to just operate things. And for me, that's kind of what I'm striving for. I'm striving for to have a big year like he did. And so I think just my knowledge of the game, kind of just being accustomed to this area. This will be year 2 for me, so just living here and really finding my group and my crowd. So I'm just really comfortable with where I'm at. So I think a lot of that has played a tribute to my performance.
In your opinion, do you view this as a quarterback competition? Is that how you're looking at it going into the spring?
To be honest, I just see myself as the starter. I had year 1 and I kind of established myself. Have year 2 and kind of just getting more bonds with the guys on the team, being a leader. So I feel like I've taken ownership of that, and I'm just ready to do my job, and I'm loving where I'm at right now. So I just expect myself to have a great spring and keep performing the way that I'm performing, and excited to help this team win.
And one thing to note there, with all this positivity from Jaxson Dart, Spencer Sanders has not been able to participate due to a nagging injury. So maybe that's a factor into it a little bit, but hey, this is his opportunity to kind of get the momentum, take the lead, and kind of distance himself from Spencer Sanders and possibly Walker Howard. Also, maybe that's why we're getting so much buzz from Walker Howard, because he's getting all these number 2 reps, where if Spencer Sanders was 100%, he'd be getting, I would assume, as many reps as Jaxson Dart. There's only so many to go around. So that is certainly something to consider. But for anybody thinking this is just Spencer Sanders coming here and he's going to start, and there's no chance Jaxson Dart is going to start, considering they brought in all these guys. I've been told that Spencer Sanders wanted to go back to Oklahoma State, and apparently Mike Gundy told him no. And the person that told, I don't follow Oklahoma State that closely, so I don't know. But the person that told me that I trust. And that's pretty interesting. And following that move, Oklahoma State had a ton of skill position players enter the portal. I think that was in large part due to Spencer Sanders being unable to return to Oklahoma State. So if that's all true, maybe Ole Miss seemed like a nice landing spot. I know Auburn people like to say they recruited Spencer Sanders, but they didn't want him. I don't know how that works, but who knows how many opportunities Spencer Sanders really had across college football, at least at this level. Ole Miss may have been the best he could get, because I have to believe if he was down at, say, Auburn, he would be the presumed starting quarterback for Hugh Freeze. And again, maybe it's unwise. I'm not sitting here trying to rule him out at Ole Miss. I mean, he's not even hit the practice field in full capacity, so things can change. But currently, it certainly sounds like Jaxson Dart is making the most of this spring with Spencer Sanders sidelined physically. All right, next let's kick it on down to LSU, where a little bit of a staff shakeup here as their defensive line coach Jamar Cain has left, I believe, for the Denver Broncos. But either way, he's gone for the NFL. We keep getting these assistants leaving right in the middle of spring. It's got to be a headache for some of these coaches to deal with. But as Brian Kelly talks about here, man, the importance of the defensive line in the SEC is just paramount. I think outside of quarterback, I think defensive line is the most important position in all the SEC. You simply cannot win a championship without stellar defensive linemen, and that is clearly the expectation and the goal in Baton Rouge, is to win these championships. So Brian Kelly, he's going to be looking to hire a new guy, possibly to promote from within, but given his statements here, it certainly sounds like they're going to try to do everything they can to bring in a premier defensive line coach to Baton Rouge. Coach O, where you at? I'm just kidding. It ain't going to be Coach O, but the ability to recruit and develop these defensive linemen, that's what Coach Kelly is looking for in his next defensive line coach.
With the defensive line, how are you guys working things around right now with Jamar gone, and just when do you kind of expect maybe something to happen there?
Coach Chapman, as you know, is a well-credentialed, experienced defensive line coach. So obviously he's coaching the interior defensive linemen during the spring. We feel great about that, and then Coach Jancic is coaching the Jack. So from that perspective, we'll go through the spring, and then obviously we're putting together our thoughts relative to do we hire within, do we go outside, and I think all of our options are on the table. We think it's important that this is a position that we examine all options. But again, we have outstanding coaches here, and we want to be able to get through the spring and then go from there.
When looking for a coach, I guess specifically D-line right now, how do you weigh out all the different variables of kind of the pros of being a coach, a teacher, a recruiter, experience, all these different things?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think if you would just look at assembling a staff in the SEC, look at the position groups that make, such an important impact on your team. And I mean, you'd hard pressed to say that the defensive line is not as important as any position. So, recruiter and talent developing is got to be at the top of the list. So the ability to recruit in the SEC and develop talent is got to be 1A, 1B. So, what does that mean? I mean, I think, it narrows your pool, from that perspective. Experience then comes into being part of that, right? You can't be an inexperienced, never been in the SEC, or knows the recruiting of this landscape, and be a qualified candidate. So I think just by the nature of me laying out the two most important factors kind of puts you on the path to what that candidate looks like.
And speaking of elite, can't utter that word at LSU without mentioning Harold Perkins, the outstanding true freshman linebacker last season. Arguably, now I thought he was better than Will Anderson last year, which is crazy because Will Anderson's about to be a top 5 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. But that's how good Harold Perkins was in his debut college season. Brian Kelly expecting more from Perkins as he's getting more acclimated with the defense. His responsibilities are being added to, getting a firmer grasp of what Matt House is going to ask of him to do this fall. I just thought this was some nice comments here from Brian Kelly.
We've talked about this a little before, but with Harold Perkins, where are you at right now in terms of, do you want him returning back inside, kind of hovering outside? What's your plan?
Yeah, we want him playing linebacker. We got him on the field last year in an accelerated role based upon the fact that there was just too much for him to digest, and we didn't want to get in the way of, too much meant, paralysis by analysis, right? So I thought Matt did a great job of making things a lot smoother for him so we could get him on the field and let him play fast. Now it's time to take the whole, position and, teach it. So, he's a linebacker. He's going to play linebacker. And he's fully invested in that position. So you'll see him playing linebacker for us.
All right, next let's get on down to Auburn. Where a little update here from Hugh Freeze, who probably didn't appreciate me predicting a win over Alabama year one in the Iron Bowl, especially considering they seemingly have no idea who's going to start for them under center. And about this time last week, it was TJ Finley was getting all the buzz. Now it's Holden Grenier, true freshman last year, redshirt freshman this season. According to Hugh Freeze, Grenier is the quarterback that has stood out this week. And it's just interesting comments here as the quarterbacks on the Plains continue to try to get a handle on what Hugh Freeze and offensive coordinator Philip Montgomery will be asking of them next fall.
Teaching, but I thought the quarterbacks overall last week took a step forward.
Anybody stand out?
I thought Holden Griner. I thought he really stood out all week with his improvement and his play, and not that the others didn't improve also, but I thought I thought his grasp of what we were trying to do, he was impressive last week. But again, it's still a competition. I think competition just is good for everybody, and how you respond to it is critical. And so the more we can create, and we'll just keep rotating those guys to see, kind of how they handle the competition. And it's going to, like I've said, it's going to go into fall camp. And the off-season will play a role in leadership and how the players are responding and rallying around you. I mean, that is the most important position that we have, and so it's going to take time to evaluate it, but I did think they all took some steps forward. Robbie was nursing a
You talk about quarterbacks. How tough is it when you're rotating guys for them to get a feel for everything, especially when you're installing offensive things?
Well, I don't know that the rotation, sometimes you might not have as good a protection in one group as you might in the other, so that's a factor. But you still know if your eyes are in the right spot and if your read is correct. And so you didn't have time to adequately throw the RPO, that's fine, but at least you made your eyes in the right spot and the ball was, you were doing the right thing. So you might not can evaluate everything, but there's a lot you can. And they're being rotated with different groups, so that's it's not the easiest thing, but yet you can start seeing flashes of they're getting it, they understand it.
I will add this real quick. I was on with an Alabama radio station. They wanted to have me on after my bold take there, Iron Bowl, Auburn winning it, and basically the guy told me, from what they were hearing, they got to add more quarterbacks via the transfer portal. So, hey, I'm not feeling too great about that pick, considering that if Holden Grenier, no offense to him, but if he's your best quarterback right now, when there was all this buzz about Robbie Ashford heading into this spring, and if it's TJ Finley, I mean, hell, that might be even worse because we've seen him. I think he's a good backup, but that's about all he is. And, so that's where things are at right now. There's a lot of time before now at fall football, but considering it's a new quarterback every week, that's not a great sign, I wouldn't think, for Auburn, considering what they have at that quarterback position. All right, last but not least, let's kick it all down to Gainesville, where Billy Napier provided an update after I believe the first scrimmage of spring down there in Gainesville. And there was some buzz. They had an offensive lineman transfer from Baylor who come in. He was projected to start. Remember, Florida's having 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line are off the roster, 2 to the NFL, 2 to the transfer portal, and off to Southern Cal. So they brought in this guy, Micah Miyazu, I think is how you say his name. He announced last week, hey, I'm hitting the portal, I'm out of here. Since deleted that, sounds like he's going to stay now, but what in the hell's going on there? Billy Napier provides some insight into what was the situation there.
Housekeeping, Micah Mazuka, he wasn't out of practice for a couple of days and then had a tweet that he deleted. Just do you have an update on his status?
Yeah, tough dynamic, right? I think a lot going on there behind the scenes, right? Micah was injured. We ended up doing an MRI. Has it's a prior injury that was kind of uncovered, right? Something that's happened in the past for him. So, I think nowadays with these players and there's a ton of expectations put on them. Injuries are a challenge, right? And certainly put you in a bad place. And Mike is a guy who is late in his career. Certainly had big ambitions here. So this is going to set him back a little bit, right? He had surgery just a few days ago, and he will be in return to play protocol. We're hopeful to get him back in training camp. But, 15 years ago, you would have never known about that. The kid goes just through a tough time, and certainly injuries are a challenge, right? And, we're hopeful Michael makes a healthy return and going to help him and support him through his rehab and all the things that come with an injury these days. So there you go.
Yeah, and that's just today's modern age of college football and social media. I mean, all this stuff gets out there that probably wouldn't have, like Napier says, years ago, but it is what it is, and you're constantly having to put out fires if you're an SEC coach, and hey, that's why they get paid the big bucks to deal with all this stuff. But more importantly for the Gators, one thing we are discounting, and we just can't really evaluate it till we see it, is that second-year jump. Which players will get better as they get more comfortable in Billy Napier's program? Napier seems pretty confident that that's going to be coming, so I really wanted to play these comments, especially after kind of downplaying what the Gators could possibly do this spring, at least I have. And the fact that Graham Mertz has kind of come in and been exactly what they need, an experienced quarterback to come in here, execute the offense. May not be a game changer, but at least at bare minimum, he's a guy that you can count on to go out there and execute, get the ball in the playmaker's hands, and that may be exactly what Florida needs, particularly considering Billy Napier, the style of game he likes to play. He doesn't like to win in shootouts and have his quarterback be some All-American. It's more ground and pound, low scoring, don't make mistakes. I don't think he got enough credit for helping Anthony Richardson limit turnovers. That was big last season. So let's kick it over to Billy Napier one last time.
Well,
had high praise for your offense. He feels like he fits real well. How does he fit in it? And what gives you confidence? Because if you look at Louisiana, there was a real jump from year 1 to year 2, about 6 points, in fact, that can translate here.
Yeah, no, man, we just weren't very good, I mean, we can't, so we're going to improve, year one's blender, man. I mean, there's a lot that comes with it, and certainly in the 2 new variables that were thrown into a mix in a transition year, I think contribute as well, right? So got to hire a group, you got to get to know a new group of players, new recruiting footprint, new investors, new leadership, just a lot, and certainly new competition. I just really have got a lot of confidence in our approach. I think we've hired well, and I think we're all going to get better, and that starts with me, right? So it's personal, if that makes sense, I mean, it really is. It's what we do, right? We teach, we coach, we evaluate, we recruit. All those things are part of the job. But the most important part is the leadership component. All these things start with me. And anybody that knows me would tell you that we're going to get it right. So,
how's Graham going to help there?
Yeah, well, he's in competition for the job. I think Graham's been impressive. I think he's an experienced player. He's comfortable. He started 32 games in a really established program with high expectations. And there's no price you can put on that, So, and I would tell you that he is his approach since the first day he's been here is what you would want from a quarterback. It's almost as if you're acquiring a free agent in the National Football League that's an experienced veteran player, and he's learning a new system. His approach has been what you would want. So, he's off to a good start, and certainly we hope he continues that way.
You mentioned the effort.
All right, hey, so that's all we got on this episode of the show. Just wanted to kind of empty out the coach clips that we had, again, heading into the weekend. And, hey, be on the lookout here. We should have a next episode. Should be a pretty special one here. Got another great guest lined up in studio, so hopefully that comes through. Should be one heck of a conversation, so be on the lookout for that next week. But I can't thank each and every one of you enough for hanging out. We'll catch you on the next one.